Jennifer Hayes, her late 30s etched with a weariness that went beyond physical exhaustion, killed the engine of the armored SUV. The silence of the Sonoran Desert immediately swallowed the last sputter, leaving only the relentless hum of distant power lines and the vast, oppressive emptiness. The Safehouse, a fortified concrete shell barely distinguishable from the surrounding rock formations, loomed under a sky painted in shades of bruised purple and orange. Beside her, Mateo Vargas, the cartel's former ledger-keeper, clutched a worn leather brief. His eyes, dark and perpetually wide, scanned the horizon as if expecting specters to rise from the dust. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of disinfectant and unspoken tension. Two junior DEA agents, Miller and Chen, were already on station, their youthful enthusiasm thinly veiled by professional stoicism. Completing the skeleton crew was Briggs, a burly, taciturn security contractor with a face like sun-baked leather. Jennifer felt the familiar prickle of unease. The isolation here wasn't just geographical. It was a psychological barrier, already pressing down on the small, disparate team. They were a handful of mismatched parts, tasked with holding something infinitely more valuable than any of them could truly comprehend. Jennifer wasted no time establishing a rigorous rotation. Perimeter checks every hour, staggered shifts for observation posts, and a strict communication protocol. She personally inspected every lock, every reinforced window, every inch of the perimeter fence, her movements precise, almost ritualistic. Mateo, meanwhile, hovered in the common room, a ghost of a man jumpy at every creak of the old building. He devoured the meager meals placed before him, but his eyes constantly darted towards the windows, betraying a terror far deeper than simple confinement. Miller, fresh-faced and eager, took notes diligently during Jennifer's briefing, occasionally interjecting with textbook questions. Chen, quieter but observant, absorbed every detail, her gaze often lingering on Mateo with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. Briggs, the contractor, simply grunted his understanding, his presence a solid, unmoving anchor in the volatile atmosphere. Jennifer watched them all, assessing their strengths, their weaknesses. They were young, some too green for this kind of pressure cooker, but they were all she had. And out here, miles from anywhere, their lives depended entirely on her meticulous planning and their ability to follow orders. The routine, she hoped, would become their shield. The desert night settled, a blanket of oppressive quiet. Jennifer, on her turn at the main observation post, heard it first. A faint, almost imperceptible hum, like an engine struggling far off. It was gone before she could fully register it. "Did anyone hear that?" she murmured into her comms. Briggs, on perimeter, grunted, "Just the wind haze." "Nothing out here but sand and scorpions." Miller from the control room offered, "Negative, Agent Hayes, all clear on the sensors." Jennifer didn't dismiss it. Her gut, honed by years of walking on razor's edge, tightened. She swept the night vision scope across the black expanse. Nothing. Yet minutes later, the main external communication line crackled, then went dead for a full 10 seconds before sputtering back to life. "Interference," Miller mumbled over the comms, "probably a solar flare or something." Jennifer's eyes narrowed. Solar flares didn't cause dead silence. Then a flicker at the extreme edge of her vision, a shadow too deep, too angular for a rock, seemed to detach from the desert floor, then vanish. She zoomed in, but it was gone. She felt a cold dread begin to coil in her stomach. This wasn't the wind. This wasn't interference. Something was out there. The cold dread Jennifer felt was a premonition realized with brutal suddenness. The desert night ripped open by a thunderous explosion that rocked the safe house, shattering the calm and throwing the compound into an instant maelstrom. The external comms exploded with static, then Briggs's raw shout, "Ambush." Perimeter breach, northeast wall. Almost simultaneously, a hail of automatic gunfire raked the main building, bullets thudding against the reinforced walls, sending concrete dust and shrapnel flying. "Go, go, go," Jennifer roared, already moving, weapon up, her senses on fire. She shoved Mateo into a reinforced closet, barking at Miller and Chen to get to their pre-assigned defensive positions. Tracer rounds streaked through the night, illuminating dark figures swarming the compound's perimeter. The sound was deafening, AK-47s, a heavier machine gun, and the occasional clang of grappling hooks hitting the roof. Jennifer returned fire through a narrow embrasure, her shots disciplined, aimed. Briggs was already exchanging heavy fire from his position, the methodical asterisk thump-thump-thump of his automatic shotgun a grim counterpoint to the cartel's assault. They were outnumbered, outgunned, but Jennifer's meticulous preparations meant they weren't entirely unprepared. This was the storm. The initial chaos gradually coalesced into a desperate rhythm of attack and defense. Jennifer, pinned down behind a reinforced observation window, barked orders over the roar of gunfire. Miller, report on the west flank. Chen, status on comms. The answers were grim. West clear for now, Agent Hayes, but they're pushing hard on the north, Miller yelled back, his voice strained. Chen, huddled by the damaged comms console, shook her head. Lines are dead, ma'am, completely severed. Satellite link won't connect either. The true scale of the assault began to sink in. This wasn't a probing attack, it was a full-scale invasion. The exterior lights had been shot out, plunging the compound into near-total darkness, illuminated only by muzzle flashes and the occasional blinding flare from the attackers. The constant rattle of automatic weapons, punctuated by the heavier asterisk thump of what sounded like a .50 caliber from outside, hammered against the Safehouse's defenses. Jennifer scanned the tactical display, now showing multiple incursions and perimeter breaches. They were completely cut off. No help was coming, it was just them against an army. The air was thick with gunpowder and the metallic tang of fear. Every window, every door became a potential breach point, and the realization chilled Jennifer to the bone. They were trapped. The relentless barrage continued, turning minutes into an eternity. A deafening crash announced a section of the perimeter wall crumbling under concentrated fire. "They're through," Miller screamed, his voice laced with panic, as a volley of rounds shredded the drywall near his position. A moment later he slumped, a dark stain blossoming on his chest. Jennifer's heart lurched. "Miller down, Chen, cover him," she yelled, but Chen was already there, her face ashen, fumbling for a medkit. Jennifer emptied another magazine, the click of the empty chamber a chilling sound. Her spare mags felt lighter than they should. "Ammunition count," she barked, her voice hoarse. Briggs's reply was grim, low, Agent Hayes, too damn low. "We can't keep this up." The initial adrenaline-fueled defiance was draining away, replaced by a cold, creeping dread. The cartel wasn't just probing, they were systematically dismantling the Safehouse piece by agonizing piece. The thought of relief, of extraction, seemed an impossible fantasy. The faces of her team, visible in the sporadic flashes of gunfire, reflected the growing despair. The unbreakable shield of their routine had shattered, leaving them exposed and vulnerable. Amidst the deafening cacophony of the siege, a new, chilling thought pricked at Jennifer's mind. The cartel's attack wasn't random, it was surgical. They hadn't just hit the main wall. The initial explosion had targeted the very communications array Chen had been struggling with. Then, moments after Miller went down, a new wave of fire concentrated directly on their secondary, less fortified observation post. It was as if they knew the precise weaknesses, the exact placement of their personnel. "Briggs, did anyone know about Miller's post-rotation or the comms set up outside of us?" Jennifer barked, ducking as a volley of rounds ripped through the wall above her head. Briggs, reloading his shotgun with grim efficiency, grunted, "Only the team, Hayes, and you, of course." The realization hit Jennifer with the force of a physical blow. The security vulnerabilities, the precise timing of the attacks, it was too accurate, too specific. This wasn't just a blind assault. Someone had fed them the blueprints, the schedule, the vulnerabilities, someone inside. Her eyes flickered to Chen, still hunched over Miller, then to Mateo, trembling in his makeshift bunker. The desert night, already thick with gunpowder, now felt laced with a potent, insidious paranoia. The enemy wasn't just outside. The siege dragged on, each minute a fresh torment. The air was thick with the smell of gunpowder, sweat, and fear. Chen, her face streaked with dirt and tears, snapped at Briggs when he suggested repositioning. What's the point, Briggs? We're dead. Miller's dead. They know everything. Her voice, usually soft, was shrill with despair. Briggs, normally stoic, slammed his fist against a reinforced wall. Pull yourself together, Agent. Hayes has a plan. What plan, Briggs? Jennifer interjected, her voice dangerously quiet. We're out of comms, we're bleeding, and we're running on fumes. The exhaustion was palpable, seeping into every corner of the safe house. Mateo, huddled in his closet, began to whimper, a low, guttural sound that grated on Jennifer's nerves. The fear was a tangible entity, pressing in on them, threatening to crush their will. Jennifer felt her own grip on control slipping. She was their leader, but their eyes, desperate and accusing, seemed to ask, why aren't we safe? Why aren't we out of here? The unspoken question hung heavy in the air. Was she leading them to salvation, or simply to a more prolonged, agonizing end? The unity was fracturing piece by piece. Jennifer forced herself to push past the team's fracturing morale. Chen, get on the emergency satellite burst communicator. We need to get a signal out, now. Chen, wiping tears from her grimy face, nodded numbly, retrieving a small, rugged device from a hidden compartment. Briggs provided cover fire as she scrambled to a slightly less exposed corner, shielding the dish with her body. The team watched, a fragile sliver of hope flickering in their desperate eyes, as Chen struggled with the connection, the tiny indicator light stubbornly refusing to turn green. The minutes stretched, punctuated by the relentless gunfire outside. Anything, Chen? Jennifer yelled, reloading her pistol. Chen shook her head, her voice cracking. Nothing, Agent Hayes, total blackout. It's like they knew exactly what frequencies we'd use, exactly where the backup comms were hidden. The last vestiges of hope guttered out, replaced by a crushing despair. Briggs cursed under his breath. But for Jennifer, the confirmation of their absolute isolation solidified a terrible thought. This wasn't just jamming, this was targeted. Only someone with intimate knowledge of the safe house's contingency plans could have achieved such a complete shutdown. The suspicion, once a cold prickle, now spread like a venomous chill. The leak wasn't a possibility, it was a certainty. Jennifer pulled Chen and Briggs into a tight, hushed circle during a momentary lull in the firing. The comms failure, the precision of their hits, this isn't random, she stated, her voice low but firm, cutting through the residual tension. Someone new, someone on the inside. Chen's head snapped up, her eyes wide with shock and offense. Agent Hayes, what are you implying? Briggs shifted uncomfortably, his gaze flicking between Jennifer and Chen. I'm not implying anything yet, Chen, Jennifer said, her eyes unwavering as she studied both their reactions. Just stating facts. This safe house, these protocols were classified. Only a handful of us had full access. Think about it. The West Observation Post was just reinforced last week. How would they know to target it if not for intel? She paused, letting the accusation hang in the air. Who had access to the full schematics? Who knew about the comms frequencies? She watched Chen's face contort, a mix of hurt and dawning suspicion. Briggs remained impassive, his expression unreadable. Jennifer continued, and Mateo, he's the prize. Anything he said, any habits he had, who was he speaking to aside from me? The paranoia was a living thing now, crawling through the strained silence, twisting every glance, every tremor into a potential tell. Jennifer's gaze, sharp and analytical, swept across the damaged control room. Her eyes landed on a small, discreet panel near the comms console, a backup line that was supposed to be completely offline, a failsafe known only to her and the most senior agents. Yet the plastic casing around its input port was subtly warped, melted at the edges, as if a small, heated device had been pressed against it. This wasn't accidental. This was deliberate. Chen, Jennifer said, her voice devoid of emotion, show me your comms kit, everything. Chen hesitated, her eyes flickering towards Briggs, then back to Jennifer. Why, I told you it's dead. Just do it. Jennifer's voice hardened. As Chen reluctantly pulled out her gear, a tiny, specialized jamming device, no bigger than a thumb drive, slipped from a hidden pocket in her uniform and clattered to the floor. Its indicator light was a faint, pulsating red. Jennifer picked it up, the plastic still warm, This wasn't standard issue. This was how the comms were precisely cut, how the backup frequencies were known. Chen stared at the device, then at Jennifer, her face draining of color. The silence was deafening, broken only by the distant gunfire. The traitor wasn't Mateo, it was one of her own. The damning silence following Chen's exposure was shattered by a new, more terrifying roar. A massive charge detonated directly beneath the main reinforced entrance, blowing the heavy steel door inwards with a deafening shriek of tortured metal. Dust and debris filled the central corridor, followed by the terrifying silhouettes of cartel gunmen pouring through the gaping breach. "Fall back to the inner sanctum now," Jennifer screamed, her voice cutting through the chaos. Briggs, his face grim, laid down a cover of suppressing fire, his shotgun barking repeatedly as he herded Mateo and a stunned Chen towards the secure inner vault where Mateo was originally housed. Jennifer followed, firing controlled bursts, ensuring their retreat wasn't a rout. The Safehouse, once a fortress, was now a death trap, its outer layers compromised. They slammed the heavy vault door shut just as the first cartel gunmen reached the corridor, their shouts and the asterisk thwack of bullets against the reinforced door echoing ominously. The inner sanctum was smaller, colder, but its walls were thicker, designed for a last stand. Another intense firefight immediately erupted, but this time the enemy was literally at their door. Jennifer checked her remaining ammunition, her heart pounding. They were cornered, bleeding, and now, with the traitor exposed, the internal threat was as real as the external one. Inside the cramped, secure vault, the air crackled with more than just the sound of gunfire from beyond the thick door. Jennifer, her pistol trained on Chen, held up the jamming device. "This explains everything, doesn't it, Chen? The precise attacks, the comms blackout, how much did they pay you?" Chen's face, a mask of terror and defiance, crumpled. "They threatened my family, they knew where my sister lived," she shrieked, tears streaming down her face. "I had no choice." Briggs, his face a thundercloud of fury, lunged forward. "You worthless piece of—" Jennifer moved with practiced speed, intercepting him. "Briggs, no, we don't have time for this." But Chen, seeing her chance, suddenly lunged for Briggs's sidearm, still holstered. A struggle erupted, swift and brutal. Briggs, surprised, wrestled with her. A shot rang out, muffled by the vault's reinforced walls, and Briggs staggered back, clutching his arm, a dark stain rapidly spreading. Chen, wild-eyed, pointed the stolen pistol at Jennifer. "You think you're getting out of this, Agent Hayes? None of us are." Jennifer, reacting instantly, fired. Chen's eyes widened in disbelief as she collapsed, the pistol clattering to the floor. The sound of her fall was almost lost beneath the renewed, frenzied assault on the vault door. Another one down. Their numbers, already critically low, dwindled further. The betrayal had cost them dearly, not just in morale, but in blood. With Chen's body a stark reminder of their internal wounds, Jennifer turned to Briggs, who was staunchly pressing a makeshift bandage to his bleeding arm. Mateo huddled in the furthest corner, a whimpering statue of fear. "Briggs, you still got fight in you?" Jennifer asked, her voice low, raspy from shouting. Briggs met her gaze, his eyes hard. Born with it, Hayes, just running low on lead. The heavy vault door began to groan under a new, more insistent assault. They were trying to breach it with explosives or perhaps a ram. "Spread out," Jennifer commanded, checking her pistol's magazine, 2 bullets left. Briggs had perhaps a dozen shotgun shells. Their only advantage was the vault's thick, reinforced concrete. Jennifer positioned herself near the door, her weapon ready. "Mateo, stay down, stay quiet." The air filled with the stench of cordite and the metallic tang of fear. The walls vibrated with the cartel's relentless efforts. Jennifer knew this was it, the final act. They were 2 wounded, exhausted individuals protecting a terrified accountant against an army. There was no strategy left, only raw will and the desperate hope that they could hold on for just a few more minutes. Each incoming asterisk thump against the door was a countdown, each shudder of the concrete a promise of their imminent demise. The heavy vault door shuddered violently, splinters of concrete showering inward as the cartel's final, desperate breach attempt intensified. Jennifer raised her pistol, 2 rounds left, aiming for the inevitable opening. Briggs, clutching his wound, had only 1 shell remaining in his shotgun. Mateo cowered, a choked sob escaping his lips. Then, from the distant, still dark desert came a new sound. Not the rattle of cartel automatics, but the unmistakable thumping chop of rotor blades, growing rapidly louder. A collective gasp of disbelief, then a surge of desperate hope surged through the small vault. Hello. DEA, Jennifer screamed, a raw primal sound of relief, but the cartel heard it too. Their assault intensified, a frenzied push to get inside before the cavalry arrived. The vault door began to give, groaning loudly. Suddenly, a blinding spotlight lanced down from the sky, followed by a torrent of heavy machine gun fire. The cartel screams were replaced by panicked shouts and the rapid, devastating asterisk crack 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 of an aerial gunship. DEA agents, fast-roping from a second helicopter, hit the ground running, engaging the cartel in a brutal, close-quarters firefight. The tide had turned. Jennifer fired her last 2 rounds through the splintering door, a desperate final contribution to the chaos, just as the vault door finally burst inward. But instead of cartel gunmen, it was a familiar face from the DEA, weapon ready, who burst through, illuminated by the helicopter's powerful beam. Days later, in a sterile debriefing room that felt a universe away from the blood-soaked desert, Jennifer sipped bitter coffee. Her body was healing, but the echoes of the night, the shouts, the gunshots, Miller's dying gasp, Chen's desperate plea, they still reverberated in her head. The cold logic of the debriefing officer, listing casualties and successes, felt distant, almost irrelevant. Briggs, arm in a sling, sat across from her, his usual stoicism replaced by a haunted quietness. They were survivors, but at what cost? Miller was gone. Chen, a fellow agent, had betrayed them, driven to desperation. Jennifer thought of Mateo, whisked away to another secure location, his valuable ledger finally in DEA hands. Was it worth Miller's life? Was it worth the shredding of their trust, the brutal revelation that even within their ranks the enemy could sow its seeds? The desert had tested her limits, but the betrayal had scarred her soul. She felt a profound weariness, a deep-seated doubt that no amount of success could truly erase. The world and her place in it suddenly felt far more complicated, far more treacherous than before. Mateo Vargas, the terrified accountant, had indeed proven to be a goldmine. His meticulous ledgers, now safely digitized and analyzed, had blown open a vast network of cartel financing, revealing hidden bank accounts, shell corporations, and corrupt officials across 3 continents. Raids had already begun, massive seizures of cash and drugs making headlines. Mateo himself, after providing his full testimony, was now under witness protection, his identity scrubbed, living a new, anonymous life somewhere far from the desert and the cartel's reach. The debriefing officer had called it a monumental success. Your quick thinking and tenacity, Agent Hayes, directly led to the dismantling of a significant portion of their financial infrastructure, he'd stated, a rare note of genuine admiration in his voice. Yet for Jennifer, the victory felt hollow. Mateo's information was undeniably critical, the kind that could cripple an organization, but the cost gnawed at her. Miller was dead, Chen was dead. Briggs was recovering, but he'd carry the scars, both physical and unseen. The data was invaluable, but the human price tag felt exorbitant. The numbers on a ledger couldn't account for the blood spilled, the trust broken, the lives irrevocably altered. The desert night had been a crucible, forging new scars on Jennifer's already worn soul. She looked at her reflection in the office window, eyes that had seen too much, lines etched deeper around them, a subtle tremor in her hand as she reached for her mug. This wasn't just another case, another win for the good guys. This was personal. Miller's face, eager and trusting, flashed in her mind. And Chen, the desperation in her eyes, the sheer terror that had driven her to betray everything she'd sworn to uphold. Jennifer had always believed in the clear lines, good versus evil, us versus them. But the siege had blurred those lines, smudged them with the gray of desperation, fear, and human weakness. Her work, once a clear mission, now felt tainted, complex. How many more Chens were out there, broken by threats, corrupted by circumstance? The trust she'd placed in her team, in the very system she served, felt irrevocably damaged. Every shadow seemed to hold a secret, every friendly face a potential mask. The physical wounds would heal, but the insidious psychological scars of that night, the paranoia, the lost innocence, the crushing weight of sacrifice, those would remain, a permanent, unwelcome part of who Jennifer Hayes had become. Months later, Jennifer Hayes sat at her new desk in a different DEA office, the hum of city traffic a distant murmur compared to the desert's silence. Her latest assignment dossier lay open, detailing the emergence of a new cartel faction, seemingly unrelated to Mateo's old organization, yet disturbingly agile. She scrolled through grainy surveillance photos, a new set of faces, new networks. The names were different, but the cold, calculating ambition in their eyes was unsettlingly familiar. A notification pinged on her secure terminal, an anonymous, encrypted message. Against her better judgment, the lingering paranoia, she clicked it open. It was a single, high-angle satellite image, unmistakably the remote desert Safehouse, but taken days asterisk after the raid, the rubble cleared, new structures already being erected. Overlaying the image in a crude, pixelated font were two words: "We adapt." Jennifer stared at the screen, a chill deeper than any desert night settling in her bones. Mateo's intel had crippled one Hydra head, but another was already rising, stronger, smarter. The cartel had learned from their defeat, from the leak, from their failures. The war was far from over. For Jennifer, the feeling of being perpetually watched, of the enemy always a step ahead, would now be a permanent, unwelcome companion. The scars of that night were not just on her soul, but woven into the fabric of the ongoing fight. She knew with chilling certainty that the desert had merely been the beginning.